Last week, Quanell, we had three huge opinions from the United States Supreme Court that have a number of people upset. The first one was that we are no longer going to allow racial preference in collegiate admissions. Okay, so that means no more affirmative action programs based solely on race, which have dominated the academic space and have existed in academia for almost 50 years. And the question is, when does it stop? When you look at the numbers of Asian applicants, so let's limit it to the Ivy League, versus with the same grades and the same scores versus African American athletes, it is almost 20 to 1. It's almost an absurd ratio, right? And of course, Asians, a huge immigrant population, are the most discriminated against. But Caucasian Americans also incredibly discriminated against in the collegiate admissions process, right? And the underlying theory of the left is that Latin American students or Latin descent students and African American descent students need this help. But the truth is the Ivy Leagues just use that as a vehicle to admit wealthy people that just check the right box. And it's really created this horrible paradigm where there's just a lack of fairness. But we also have to recognize that there are a huge number of kids that are let in because of legacy admissions, which is incredibly biased against African American applicants. We have to recognize that there are a number of kids, especially the Ivy Leagues, that get in on what's called Dean List preference, right? Which is, of course, the children of famous people, the children of powerful people, and most importantly, the children of major donors. And while these might be private institutions, they receive a tremendous amount of federal money. So I would argue, hey, it's probably a good thing to end affirmative action, but what we need to do is, instead of just letting people in by checking a box, that we need to look deeper and look at the individual struggles people overcome that are not necessarily tied to race.
Let me tell you how you look
and
deeper.
We need to eliminate the legacy and wealth-based admissions.
Let me tell you how I believe we should look deeper, Charles. One, they ruled affirmative action to be unconstitutional, right?
Well, it's race-based discrimination.
Unconstitutional. But at the same time, they left legacy in play.
Well, that wasn't in front of the court.
But still, what we have to understand is the court won't even address something like that. And then they allowed other methods of discriminatory practice to take place in admissions. To be honest with you, Charles, and I'm going to be very honest with you.
It's a nice change of pace.
We have to stop in the African American community believing the hypocritical lies being sold to us of things that came out of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That's what affirmative action was born out of. And we fought so hard for it, believing that affirmative action would give a boost and a lift to the masses of African Americans. That's the liberal lie told to us as a people. But the biggest benefactors of educational affirmative action and accomplishments through affirmative action were not black people. Black men were the least benefactors in higher education with affirmative action. What I believe that we should have did, we must seek something greater, because so many HBCUs have been underfunded on purpose across the country. Why don't we stop teaching our children that they have to go to white universities to be academically successful? They can also be academically successful at Howard, at Spelman, at Morehouse, at Fisk. But we have sold the lie to our own children that they are not receiving a quality degree if it's not coming from a white institution. You cannot take one wrong and implement another wrong to equal a right. We had no idea in the black community that Asians one day would be discriminated against using affirmative action. We never knew that. But it should not be an Asian person who's academically successful and have achieved greatness academically be denied solely because a black person is applying for the same offer or for the same degree or for the same scholarship. Man, it's a touchy subject because the spirit of it was right in the beginning, but the implementation of affirmative action and the lie sold to black people was wrong.
Well, so what we have is 50 years ago. A little bit less than 50 years ago, and we'll limit it to the Ivy League. You had the widespread implementation of affirmative action. And of course, it made a lot of sense back then because you had, not just in academia, you had all of these glass ceilings put in place to keep African Americans out of institutions, out of employment, out of a number of things, right? But the question is, when does it end? And when you look at the admission standards, and let's limit it to Harvard because they were part of the suit, when you look at the admissions, the academic difference between African American students that are admitted versus Asian students is unbelievably different, right? You have Asian students with perfect GPAs and perfect test scores getting denied, where you have African American students which much lower scores and much lower GPAs being admitted for no other reason other than checking the box. Whereas what the Supreme Court proposed many years ago was, well, you can use race as a factor, but then it became the primary factor. Even Professor X. Kendi, the critical race scholar, he tweeted once, he said, well, a bunch of white people are lying about their race and getting into schools they didn't deserve to get into. And he immediately
Elizabeth Warren did that.
He immediately deleted that tweet, right?
Why?
Because he realized that it actually affirms the argument that the admission standards have become so unfair that people are having to lie about being not cisgendered, people are having to lie about their race, and then all of a sudden they're eligible to get into schools.
But that happens all the time,
but the truth is, what schools should be doing is they should be looking at individual struggles, right? Like, why should a white kid who grew up in the foothills of West Virginia taking a crap in an outhouse have a harder time getting into USC despite growing up in poverty and struggling and not having any opportunity than, let's say, Dr. Dre's daughter, who is a student there now, just simply because she checked the African American box. What we should have was you would require that an analysis of the individual struggle. And race is involved in individual struggle. There's a legacy of poverty. There's a legacy of lack of opportunity. I think we should always look at first generation students and give them a,
but you brought up a valid point there, Charles.
Just a skin
That's
color.
a hidden secret.
It's just.
Here's a hidden secret.
Okay.
I believe the masses of white people, as well as the masses of black people, have been kept totally in the dark about white poverty in America. If you look at Appalachia and really expose to the rest of America what white poverty looks like in white Appalachia, it's extremely shocking, and you would not even think we're still in America. And these are white people. But I believe the spirit of the law was good in the beginning, but I'm a firm believer, as I said before, give black institutions, academic institutions, reparations. They gave it to Vietnamese children for academic opportunities, but you didn't give it to African Americans with affirmative action. That was a joke. The least benefactors of it was black men in higher education. We have to come up with something better if we want to level the playing field. But you cannot have one minority group taking advantage of another minority group because the person that we're trying to have make the evaluations at Ivy League institutions don't look like either one, but they deny one over the other and then blame the one over the other.
That's actually a gross misstatement of the racial content of admission committees for Ivy League universities right now, which are incredibly diverse. In fact, Ivy Leagues.
But you just said they use blacks.
Most of the
they
Ivy
use blacks
Leagues
to discriminate against Asians,
are
right?
Majority minority, right? So they are actually clearly statistically discriminating against white people and Asian people. And Asian
so
people
that's what I'm saying, Charles.
Asian people are being discriminated against because of the success of Asian
communities. But you
highlighted
academia. Asian test scores and Asian GPAs.
Many Asian families prioritize education. They prioritize intact families, and they prioritize helping each other achieve.
And we agree with that. But
Okay.
if they're using in admissions African Americans with lower test scores, lower GPAs, over Asians with higher GPAs and test scores.
So you agree it's unfair.
Well, then what you're doing, you're using one minority as the excuse to discriminate against another one. It's wrong.
But here's the truth. Now,
It's wrong.
in 2023, all of the Ivy League institutions, all of them are majority minority, which means actively white people are being discriminated against. But you don't want to talk about that. And when you talk about white poverty, see, that's the big issue, right? There's this myth of the holistic white experience, that every white person grows up upper middle class, that every white person's had all this educational opportunity, that every white person has some sort of legacy admissions to an Ivy League. But the truth is that you have about 9 million black people in poverty in America. You have 20 million white people in poverty in America. And while there's a larger amount per capita, which is what people focus on, when you look at aggregate numbers, why would a poor white person say, oh, no, it's okay to discriminate against me because somebody else made themselves a fortune before, but I've always been poor. And what I say is what we should all do is look at individual barriers and access, right? Look at every individual candidate and say, hey, this is what they overcame. This is why we're going to accept them with a different or a lower score. But instead, we've just said, hey, if you check this box, it's this. You can get in this way, but if you don't check that box, well, it's
what
a
you're
super high
saying
standard.
Is a good idea,
and that's
Charles.
insane.
I agree with you, Charles.
It's unconstitutional.
Look at the economic realities of every individual applicant. But Charles, at the same time, we just cannot ignore and deny history, because today was built from yesterday, tomorrow built from what we do today. Charles, African Americans were placed at a significant disadvantage because of the history of this nation.
Well, don't you think we should do that by fixing schools, the public school system for African Americans? I mean, that's the real thing. The suggestion that black people, the suggestion from many white liberals that black people can't compete against white people and Asian people is pure racism. It's pure bigotry, because they've done studies. There's no race of people that's any smarter than any other damn race of people. I will say that it does seem that people of African descent are a lot better at sports than white folk, but there's no one that is smarter based on the color of their skin.
According to a study that was done between Howard and Fisk University, and one doctoral student wrote a very detailed dissertation about this. Do you know that African American test scores were higher during segregation, during integration? Do you realize that you had more black males applying to higher education universities and had higher grade point averages during segregation than during integration? That's a fact.
You did not have more applicants, and nor did you have more students.
Black people, there were more black men. No, you're wrong about that. The study concluded that more black men were attempting and applying for college education than what happened during
numbers or
segregation.
per capita numbers?
Per capita.
Okay.
Then also, it's also showed that even right here, take HISD. Mm-hmm. When you look at HISD, what it resulted, what it came to, do you realize that the public school system during segregation, African American students collectively as a whole, their test scores were equal to white schools and white public schools? No, here's what I'm saying to you is, we were talking about really study the problem and come up with a solution. Why is it right here in Houston that African American test scores in public schools during segregation
because our HISD
was equal to white schools?
Do you think HISD is doing a good job?
No.
I mean, there's a reason, you like to call it white flight, but I think it's purely middle class flight. There's a reason everyone that can
let me tell you what happened, Charles.
Suburbia.
When we as black people doing segregation, we always had these beliefs. We work harder, we study harder, we stay focused, we make no excuses, men stay at home with their families, men be responsible for the things men should do, the women be more proactive with helping those children grow academically in the home. But when the liberal mindset of a whole nother race of people interjected themselves into the black reality,
so
our principles went backward.
What race of people?
White people, white liberals.
So white liberals,
yes,
are to blame for all the problems in black society?
I'm not saying that.
But
what I'm saying is white liberals played a significant role in the psychological damage and the economic damage that took place in the black community. Absolutely they did. White liberals produced the American welfare system for black people and told black women that if you had a black man in the home, if a black man stopped by, if a black father brought a pair of sneakers and a pair of pants to his child and you didn't report it, we would cut off your benefits and you would get not one dime from the government. It was the white liberal mindset that said no matter how many babies a black woman had, we would continue giving her a check and we're not going to hold the father accountable. It was the white liberal mindset, Charles, that told black women, if you file child support on the father, we cancel your benefits doing welfare.
Actually,
that was destructive, brother.
The system is
that was destructive.
That they require you to file child support. You got to back
now, but not during the 70s and 80s.
Okay, yes, it was.
No.
Yes, it
we
was.
were on welfare. We were on welfare. If you file for child support and you receive $1 from that man doing child support, you lost your welfare benefits.
Well, no, it wasn't $1. There was always there's always been a resource analysis. And I'll agree with you to some degree that incentivizing a broken home to get a check was a horrible thing for everyone, not just Black America, but for all Americans, right? But at the end of the day, when we talk about the budget on welfare, it's often the bureaucracy that costs the most, and it's idiotic, right? Instead of limiting how much money that you get for children, we're in the richest country in the world. I mean, the most successful country in the world. What we should be doing is making sure there's no starving children in this country by any means necessary, right? And once you get past the issue of starvation or safety, then you can look at better schools. If you want to talk about real reparations in this country would be to reject the notion that Black people can't compete academically, that Latin people
I completely
can't
agree.
believe, because it's a lie. And we could say, you know what? Let's take this money.
But who sold that lie, Charles?
It's sold by a great number of people, but I agree, the liberal left, right? But there's a great number of people of color who embrace that because it gives more access and more benefit to them and their progeny, right? But at the end of the day, if we could just
and
say,
it wasn't worth it, it was a trick.
If we could just say, hey, look, let's fix the underlying problem, because checking the box, making it all based on race, means you don't have to address the underlying problem, which is many urban school districts are turning out people that can't compete, that can't even read, right? And it has nothing to do with skin color, it has to do with families, and it has to do with school districts. But hold on.
Touch on what you're
when
saying.
you look at the Asian immigrant families, these Asian immigrant families, they are more intact, right? They're more intact than the white community, more intact than the Black community, and more intact than the Latin community.
And their test scores are higher than whites and Blacks.
Well, but the question is why?
But guess what, though?
Is because their
Here's
parents
something else, Charles.
Bust their ass and make them
Charles,
study
and
push them and support them.
Charles, do you realize that Indians, Arabs, and Asian test scores are higher than whites and Black students in America?
Actually, no. South Asian, Indian, Pakistani,
yes,
and Asian,
their test scores are higher.
But that's not.
I'm gonna tell you something else is deep.
Actually, it kind of draws the line there.
Wait a minute. I'm gonna tell you something else is deep. Do you know that African immigrants who come to America, their test scores are equal and in some cases higher than whites in America? These African immigrants, but yet people raise the question: well, why is the African
study the numbers? That's actually not true.
Why is the African immigrants coming to academic better than what we do?
I will agree with you that African immigrants, first generation African immigrants, tend to do far better when compared against longer term Black Americans, and that speaks to the economic legacy and the educational legacy of not just slavery.
But they come from broke countries.
But hold on, they're not just the legacy of
they're
not
economically
just slavery,
poor,
but Jim Crow and all of that. And then I had a long conversation.
No, Charles, this is what the issue is, Charles. Those African immigrants, they're not coming from broken homes.
So they're coming here to win.
Most of those kids are coming from two-party households.
Okay.
And most of them have been taught, make no excuses.
Right.
You come into America, you work your ass off. Right. If you got to work 3 and 4 jobs, we've heard African-American comedians make jokes about Africans having 4, 5, 6, and 7 jobs. It's a joke to laugh at, but the reality is they have had institutionalized into them a different cultural reality and a different home experiences that demands accountability. If we start demanding accountability in the public school system in America, we could change a lot of this. But that's what nobody wants to do. Nobody wants to hold teachers, parents, and students accountable. We want to blame teachers. Teachers want to blame the administration want to blame parents want to blame everybody else involved. If we really put something in place to hold all accountable, first in the homes, that's how we change it.
Well, Quanell, I had a conversation once in Jamaica with a young man who was heartbroken because his visa was denied. He worked 4 or 5 jobs, he just had his first baby, and he was talking about, man, if he could just get to America lawfully, he would come here and work himself to death that I had to win, right? And when you talk about Africans that immigrate to the United States, most of it is lawfully, right? Most of them are successful families. When you look at what's happening in Europe, it's very different. It's very similar to the poorest border of our southern states. I'm very pro-immigration, right? But I'm very pro-lawful immigration, and I'm very pro throwing people out that come here and break the law, right? Because we should be trying to build the safest America that we can with the most opportunity for everyone that can lawfully come here. But instead, right, the billionaire oligarchs and the Democrats They want more, the billionaires want more market participants, more cheap labor, and more consumers, right? And the Democrats think, well, this is our way to ultimate total control, and we no longer have to worry about it. I mean, you look at, like in New York, in Chicago, you're seeing a great voice, loud voices from the African American community that are saying, hey, why on earth are you doing more for people that enter this country illegally than you're doing for young, poor black kids and veterans of all races and all this stuff? And at some point, we need to say to America, hey, we're going to start putting Americans of all races first. We're going to recognize that we have largely failed urban
and when
black
Donald
children,
Trump said that,
students.
When Donald Trump said that,
Donald Trump's just lying.
But wait a minute, he was intelligent to say that.
No, he's
when
just
he
a pandering liar.
What he did, whatever he did was what he did. But when he said put America first, he was right, man. He was right. Because charity starts at home first.
Earlier in the week, you were just demonizing America.
No, but that's not what I said.
But
I said America must put Americans first. Why? Because charity starts at home, then it spreads abroad. You cannot do for others what you're failing first to do for yourself.
We give billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. We spread it around the world. We give money to countries that have health care for everyone in the country.
I'll give you a better one.
We do all this crap for everyone, but we don't do anything for ourselves.
What if we gave half of the budget for America's defense contractors, private defense contractors? What if we took their money and put it back in education?
But here's, that'd be great. But here's another thing, Quanell. The new thing with the left, with the Democrats, is this race-based provision of, well, if you check this box, well, you can get this entitlement or benefit. If you check this box, you get this. Instead of trying to figure out solutions for all Americans. It's nice to hear you talk about all Americans, but oftentimes you're framing it merely as, this is what we need to do for the black community. But the truth is, we can find solutions for all communities, right? We can have better schools for all communities. And every school should look like a wealthy suburban school. We should have more safety, right? All these police reforms, it's not reform. It's just telling many black Americans, well, you just got to live with being unsafe and victimized, and we're not going to do anything about it. And when you talk about fairness in admissions for colleges, if it becomes not race, but it becomes the life, what happened to people and what they overcame, well, that's going to be fantastic, but it's easier to be a bigot, whether you're on the left or the right, by looking solely at race. And what we need to do is abandon race as a construct and start looking at human beings, right? I don't think you'll ever subscribe to that, but when you say we need solutions for all Americans, we need an America for all Americans, and we should be helping the weakest and the poorest of America before we help people that have entered this country illegally. But right now it's very easy for Republicans to say, oh, well, we shouldn't be doing this to immigrants, but they don't want to do anything for anybody else, right? Because they want to give all, it's like the PPP loans versus the educational loan forgiveness, right? Now, the reason the Supreme Court struck down the loan forgiveness was because it wasn't approved by Congress, where PPP was. But that was just people in Washington just helping out their damn rich friends, right? So at the end of the day, hey, maybe we should start term limiting people in Congress. Maybe we should stop worrying about the wealthiest in the society and start worrying about the poorest and providing a platform to be successful.
I believe the politicians,
but that's not going to happen, especially if you're a poor white American, because nobody cares about you.
Politicians can implement something that works for all Americans, but I don't believe they can do that if we'll continue to align corporate dollars to finance political campaigns.
Well,
they're going to always be
thank the Supreme Court for that, too.
They're going to always be controlled by those corporate dollars.
Right.
Now, but just talk about nobody cares about white Americans.
No, nobody cares about white poor Americans. Nobody cares. And there's this myth that they don't even exist.
America's always cared about white people.
Okay.
But I agree with you.
In 2023,
as I said earlier, the great secret is white poverty in America. You're right. They don't want the world in particular to know the level of white poverty in America. They don't want, in particular, black people to really see what white poverty looked like in America, because we would be so shocked.
It makes it much harder to be a bigot.
But wait. We'd be so shocked, we'd wake up and we'd say this: damn it, we being played by the same people that's got both of us in poverty.
Of course,
we being ripped off by the same damn crooks that got both of us in poverty. So if they can keep two poor men fighting over a plate of food when the thief got the whole kitchen, well, then that's exactly how you do it.
Well, that's the thing. If white people hate black people and black people hate white people, nobody hates the government. But you sit on this TV, on this very show, and you hate on white people constantly. So
I don't hate on white people.
Yes,
I speak the truth about America. And I speak the truth about white people in this country.
White people. The truth is, we're not our skin color defines none of us, right? We are defined by our actions and our character.
Well, then why don't we do this then? Why don't we do this? See, here's one of the big con games. You want to end race issues in America? Disallow racial check boxes in everything. In everything. Why is the government is always asking us our race on some form we're filling out? Why is that necessary? If we're all Americans, it should be, are you an American or you're not? Right or wrong?
Well, they're going to give you more benefits if you're not. I mean, that's the simple truth.
But I'm saying to you, Charles, why don't they outlaw the use of racial boxes and categories?
Well, I think they do it for statistical purposes, but I don't disagree.
They do it for different reasons, brother.
I think we need to stop focusing on each other and start focusing more on both the uniparty, the Democrats and the Republicans, are really trying to keep us at each other's throats so we don't demand better from our government. But that's just me.
Well, I say we will come together soon. It won't be long for the racial problem in America. It's going to go so low we won't even recognize it.
You mean World War III?
That's right. It's
That's exactly right.
When Korea, Russia, and China get together and decide they're going to come rolling down 610, and they're going to land at Reliance Stadium, well, it won't be no more race problems in America.
Rolling down 610.
Won't be no more race problems in America.
Ain't no foreign country coming into this country, because unlike everywhere else, we haven't given up our guns.
And we all thought that 19 hijackers with plastic silverware could shut the American entire economy system to the ground and bring it to its knees, to where it collapsed almost. They had to just shut everything down. 19 men with plastic silverware. Don't say what won't happen.
Go back and
Don't say what won't happen.
Go back and watch Red Dawn.
And go back and watch Pearl Harbor.
There you go.